Long ago, there was a little old woman who was not afraid of anything. Every day she went into the woods to gather herbs, sometimes firewood. And one day, as she was getting ready to go home with her basket full of herbs, she heard clump, 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 clump. And when she turned around, there on the pathway were a pair of boots going clump, 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 clump. She said, "I'm not afraid of you, you boots. Go on about your business." And she started home. Well, it wasn't long after that she heard behind her clump, 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 clump. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. And when she turned around, she saw the pair of boots going clump, clump. She also saw a pair of pants going wiggle, 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 with nobody inside them. And she said, "You can't scare me, you pair of pants. Get on down the path." And she went a little further toward home, when all of a sudden she heard behind her clump, 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 wiggle, 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 shaky, shaky, shaky. And when she turned around, there were the boots going clump, clump, and there were the pair of pants going wiggle, 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 and there was a shirt going shaky, 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 and nobody was inside it. And she said, "You can't scare me, you shirt. Get on away." But she started walking just a little bit faster toward home. Well, it wasn't long before she heard behind her, as she walked down the path, the boots going clomp, 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 and the trousers going wiggle, 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 and the shirt going shaky, 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 shaky. And then she heard and there was a hat floating behind her on the breeze with no head underneath it. And she said, "Oh, hat, you can't scare me. Just go on and find somebody to scare." But she started walking a little bit faster toward home. And just as she was in sight of her little house, she heard another sound. And it was clap, 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 clap. And when she turned around, she saw the boots going clump, 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 clump. And she saw the trousers going wiggle, 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 wiggle. And she saw the shirt going shaky, 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 shaky. And she saw the hat going and she saw a pair of gloves going clap, 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 clap. And they all followed her right up to the door. And she stood on the porch and she turned around and she put her hands on her hips and she said, "You can't scare me. I'm not afraid of anything. Now get." And she went into her house and shut and locked the door. And she had her supper. And she sat around reading a book. And then she went to bed. But just before she closed her eyes, she heard something outside her door going clump, 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 wiggle, 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 shaky, 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 clap, 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 boogity boo. Well, the boogity boo was new, and she went and she opened the door, and there was a scary jack-o'-lantern face going boogity boo, boogity boo. And she slammed the door and ran back to bed and pulled the covers up over her head. And the next morning, when she got up and the sun was shining and the birds were chirping, she opened her front door. And there were the boots and the trousers and the shirt and the hat and the gloves and the pumpkin face. And they all looked sad. And she said, "Why are you sad?" And the pumpkin face said, "Boogity boo, we wanted to scare you, but you aren't afraid of anything." And she said, "Oh, you like to scare things, do you?" "Yes, boogity boo, boogity boo." Well, and the little old woman whispered in where the jack-o'-lantern would have had ears. And she said, "Boogity boo! That's a wonderful idea." And a few minutes later, when she went out to her vegetable patch, there were the boots that went clomp clomp, and there were the trousers that went wiggle wiggle, wiggle wiggle, and there was the shirt that went shaky shaky, shaky shaky, and there was the hat that went whoo, and the gloves that went, and the scary jack-o'-lantern face that went boogity boo. And they were all ready to scare away the crows. And that's the end.